Hey guys, what's up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over Tesla, let's go over the broader market, and let's talk about what is happening and what we can expect moving into tomorrow. Don't forget, Thursday, the market's closed. Friday is a half day. But jumping into a Tesla, or before we jump into it, if you enjoy my technical analysis, my videos, etc., well, again, don't forget to hit that like button. It does help a lot, guys. I would appreciate that. But also, again, if you enjoy my technical analysis, again, I share my thoughts, post updates with my members every single day on my private YouTube membership section. If you'd like to join us, again, the link is down below. Click that first link. And you get access to, the option to join if you wish. Just $3 a month. That's all it is for all my Tesla updates, broader market updates as well, which includes things like, SPY, Qs, VIX, things like that, and options flow for them as well. And of course, different time frame analysis, obviously mainly focused on Tesla. $5 includes NVDA as well. $7 includes the whole package. So you get everything on top of access to my tier 3 posts that include individual tickers that are essentially not Tesla and NVIDIA. And also access to my private Discord where I do chart reviews every Sunday with members. And also we have a tier 3 chat room there as well. But jumping into it, guys, Tesla, with the okay day, we'll say. I mean, all things considered, today was a bit of a wonky day in the markets. The markets were actually, holding up fairly decently. Tesla's kind of, mediocre, not bad, not great. But then stocks like NVIDIA and AMD definitely getting dragged down pretty substantially on the news overnight. But today's Tesla's price action, despite only being about 0.3% in the green, which isn't a whole lot, right? Arguably has been fruitful for the bulls at least, right? It has potentially opened up a door for the bulls to see higher. Now, this obviously comes with certain levels being broken, which of course I'll talk about. But again, the point I'm trying to make is the fact that despite we pretty much didn't really ultimately go anywhere today in terms of the close compared to yesterday, there is still some good price action. So first and foremost, let's go to the 1 hour time frame. This is what I mentioned yesterday, right? Remember yesterday I mentioned how that I personally believe that we most likely have a higher than not chance, if you will, to get that sell off, right? We got that sell-off right into the region I talked about, right? Again, I said about, the low 14s. Obviously, we went slightly below because, again, I'm not going to, get the exact price, especially when we're in the 400s to the penny. That's just impossible. But the idea was the fact that we come down to, retest this zone down over here, which was an obvious area of a 1 hour resistance, which you can see I have circled. Essentially test that, and as long as we hold that, that'll be a good sign. That's exactly what happened. We ended up obviously coming right down to it in the morning, and we ended up testing it, holding it, and then we bounced off of it and closed at, a pretty decent spot. Now, the next thing to watch for, now that this is done, which is good, is going to be some continued strength. This is going to be the important part. Do we see continued strength in the market, or do we not continue seeing strength in the, well, I guess more specifically in Tesla and the market in general too? I'll go over the market as well. That's going to be the question I'll be watching right now moving forward into as early as tomorrow, right? So for Tesla, when we had this initial breakdown, which by the way, again, I want to make this clear, even though I am going to be talking about some of the short-term bullish potential here, I'm still not overall fully bullish on Tesla just yet until we break and close above this trend line, or obviously below this trend line where obviously I become a lot more bearish. Those still need to be confirmed. However, with that being said, because we came down, because we obviously turned this area that was a resistance, you can see in all these candles here, into support. You can see that on today's candle. That's a good sign. That's a good first step to see into the 430s. To essentially retest that trend line, maybe even as early as tomorrow. Let's see. The next step, and the thing that will most likely, really trigger this move higher. So again, depending on when it happens, if it happens as early as tomorrow, we can easily see Tesla in the mid 430s, right? That's where that trend line currently sits as resistance. Again, it depends on when it happens. If it's Friday, a little bit lower, right? It just, again, depends on when and how quick it actually happens. But the trigger that you want to be waiting on Tesla stock is, well, okay, again, like I said, when we had this drop, the 9 EMA was the one that was resisting us. We couldn't get past above the 9 EMA. We couldn't close candles above the 9 EMA. Yesterday, we did, which is good. Today, we're closing again above the 9 EMA, arguably turning it into a support above the 50 EMA. But the thing that's still kind of haunting us and holding us back is, well, the red line, the 21 EMA. This thing is still kind of haunting us a little bit. We need to get back above that. So, in other words, if Tesla can essentially get back above tomorrow, even price breaking above about 422 to 423 will already be, in my opinion, a good sign. But especially if we can maybe just close tomorrow, let's say tomorrow we close at 424 as an example, that would be a good sign. That would show strength. Now we start closing above other key levels that we couldn't before, kind of like what we did here. And that would open up the door to retesting higher to about the mid 430s. It depends on how quick it happens, right? If it happens really quick, high 430s. If it happens, let's say Friday, maybe Monday, mid 430s. If it takes a bit longer until, let's say next week, Wednesday, 430, because the trend line is, of course, descending. So, the speed matters. But the point is, regardless, seeing the 430 handle and change becomes a very real possibility if we can just snap and break above this nice little small resistance zone that is so far kind of holding back the price a little bit and not letting us get too far away from each other. So that's something I'll be watching moving forward. The interesting thing is this, because I do think that I personally believe, unless the market just, collapses tomorrow, which is a possibility, I guess, but unless the market really takes a poopsie doopsie tomorrow, there is, in my opinion, a good chance that we most likely will see this. Obviously, confirmation is above the level I just mentioned. The interesting thing to note here, though, the fact that we're going to be going up to this to this range, especially if it takes a couple of days. Let's say it's not tomorrow. Let's say it takes until Monday. Let's say Monday is when we see it, as an example, right? The 4-hour SMI. This is where things get a little bit interesting. Let me go on the 4-hour time frame itself. You can see when the SMI reached the bottom zone over here, this kind of green line, and it pretty much was right around that, we bottomed out. The pressure for continued downwards momentum from there became, what's the word I'm looking for? There was less pressure to continue. There was a higher risk of moving higher than lower, or at least meaningfully lower, I should add, from this level right here, where that 4-hour SMI came down to that green zone. And again, Tesla is a stock that for the most part, it's not perfect, but for the most part, respects this 4-hour SMI. Now, there's always going to be exceptions, when the stock goes extremely parabolic up or down, of course, right? You'll have those exceptions. But more often than not, it respects it. And that's exactly what happened here. This is why I mentioned when we fell down all the way over here and we bounced, I mentioned that there's a good chance that we, even if we do ultimately come down to these levels here, there's a good chance we continue chopping here for quite some time to really refresh that 4-hour SMI. And we're continuing to refresh that. And not only are we refreshing it and essentially cooling it off from those oversold conditions, we're actually going up to the opposite end of the spectrum now. We're getting close to the red line. And the same thing is true on the red line, guys. Again, unless we go parabolic, unless we get, parabolic, we start really breaking key levels and we start, going to the moon essentially. There's a good chance that as we make our way up to this, test of this trend line here in the 430s, right? Somewhere in the 430s, depending on how quick it happens, there's a good chance that this thing also appears, makes its way to the red line, which in that case becomes arguably pretty much a double resistance. And then it comes down to, do we see the strength or do we not? Do we see a rejection here into maybe a small bull flag? We hold key levels and then we blast off higher, or is this going to be a strong rejection and then we just ultimately do go lower down to these levels down here, as the 4-hour SMI will then do something like this, and then it'll meet us down here once again as we come down to these levels here. We don't have the answer to that. I don't have a fortune ball. I can't predict the future, but those are the kind of pathways that I see, which again, we'll have better ideas as to which one is the more likely one than not, as price continues to develop, as price continues to test key levels, reject at key levels, supports, etc. That's kind of the idea. But again, the overall main perspective is still watch for these two trend lines. If we start showing nice strength above this, the EMAs start supporting price, we don't really start collapsing, and we start turning key levels into supports, then we can go higher. But if we get a rejection from here, there is still a very real possibility that this is going to be a very, very large bull trap and we ultimately head lower like this. That's still a very key and real possibility. So again, it'll just come down to, can the bulls finish the job here, something that the bears obviously couldn't do here, or are the bulls also going to falter, kind of like the bears did here, and then make their way down, and then the bears get another shot, right? Again, let's see, right? One step at a time. We cannot predict the future, so let's continue monitoring that slowly but surely, ladies and gentlemen. Pretty simple stuff in my opinion. What else is there? Weekly. One indicator I sometimes like to use, mainly on the weekly. I only really like using this on the weekly, right? Because on the daily, there's just too many false signals with this one, right? It's like, this was a false signal, this was a false signal, this was a false signal, this was a false signal. Like pretty much all of these were arguably false signal. Too many false signals. But what I do like about this indicator is I like it on the weekly, right? And this is the stochastic. Essentially, if you can see this white line inside the green zone, that means bulls are in control. Momentum is to the upside more so than to the downside, like by far. The weekly last week actually did close underneath it. But this week, if assuming nothing goes wrong, let's say, for instance, right, assuming we don't sell off tomorrow into Friday, as long as Tesla can close the weekly back up here and close the stochastic back into this green zone, that would be a good development. That would actually be a positive development. So let's see how the weekly candle closes. Let's see if we can close with that strength or not. We still have a day and a half. Again, Thursday markets close. Friday is a half day. So if Tesla can close with strength like that, that would be a pretty good sign. That would be a sign of good things to come moving forward. So let's continue monitoring that, guys. Let's continue watching. Let's see how this overall shapes up and how it overall develops moving forward. But, we're entering potentially some key zones because, again, you have to understand, this sort of is almost like a pennant, like a very, very large pennant. As we get closer and closer to the climax, we're going to get not only closer and closer to the resolution, whichever way it's going to be, right? Once we actually break out above one of these levels. Is there a good chart I can show you that just had maybe a recent breakout of the pennant? Maybe like, I don't know, ASTS, maybe something like ASTS. ASTS is setting up one right now, but I mean, kind of like this, I guess you can argue, right? You can kind of make an argument, something like this, where you can see ASTS, right? Massive move to the upside, to the downside. And, you can see it kept projecting this trend line, It was getting tight, and it was getting tight. Tesla's like right around here. Now, I'm not saying for sure Tesla's going to move up, of course, but just as an example of how these resolutions take place, because as we get tight, we're building up the pressure. And then once one of the sides gives up or down, watch the trend lines. Usually you get a pretty nice move in that respective direction. Now, there's always a risk of a false breakout or breakdown, so you also have to take risk into consideration. Nothing is guaranteed. But this is kind of the idea I'm trying to kind of, explain, I guess you can say. So let's continue monitoring that. Let's see how this actually develops. But this is sort of what we're setting up on Tesla here. We are building up some pressure over here, kind of like what we built up pressure down here. And then we finally blasted off with these candles. You can see a nice elevated volume, kind of the same idea. We're building pressure around this area. So, if the weekly can close in the stochastic here, that would be a good sign of things to come potentially. So let's continue monitoring that, guys, one step at a time, of course. And then let's talk about the broader market very, very quickly before this video takes 20 years. SPY actually looks good. Qs look potentially good. Very annoying because SPY actually doesn't look too bad to me, right? Now, obviously, this is the kind of more aggressive trend line, right? Technically speaking, if you want to be a little bit more, really want the market to convince you that this is going to go higher. This is, a second trend line you can watch for SPY that, it would need to break. That looks something like this, I guess you can say for sure. But, the fact that SPY is already breaking this trend line right here, that's a good sign. The fact that it's breaking above this resistance level and you're closing above that, that's a good sign. The fact that SPY is above the exponential moving averages again, because we could have easily rejected right here. We could have easily came up, rejected, and then moved down. Kind of like what we did, back here, for instance, where we had this nice massive move to the downside, rejected, and then moved down, right? There's always that risk. You never know for sure, right? That's why, risk management is important. But SPY is not looking bad at all, guys. Not bad at all. I mean, arguably, you can say this trend line is the next one to break up here, so we'll continue watching that. But this head and shoulders pattern is arguably also being invalidated unless the market really starts to kind of poopsie doopsie itself. So let's continue monitoring how this goes. But I do like the way SPY is shaping up. It's not looking too bad. Now, any potential redness that we get coming into as early as tomorrow, I want to see SPY now turn this sort of very low 670s into support. As long as 670s now become support for SPY, things are looking pretty good. If we start losing and closing below the 670s again, and especially below the high 660s, okay, now it's not looking as sexy anymore. But as long as we hold this area now, right around here, it's not looking too bad. The issue I have is Qs don't look as sexy. The Qs still have a bit of work to do. Now they're very, very close. They came up right to that trend line, getting a very tiny rejection, but a small rejection nonetheless. So what the Qs need to do is continue showing strength. Essentially, if the Qs can break above today's high and also break above about 613, so about this $3 range, 610 to 613, that'll be very bullish actually for the markets, right? I would view that as a bullish sign of things to come, because then we would break above these levels, and then as long as we turn it into support, we break above the trend line, we break above key resistance level, we nullify this potential bearish head and shoulders pattern, that would be a potential good sign to see, and that would start favoring the bulls much more heavily. And arguably even more importantly is the exponential moving averages will start turning back into support now, which again, you can see the market likes to ride these bad boys as support for the most part. So let's continue monitoring. The market it's looking good. The bulls are being given a phenomenal opportunity. Now it's just going to be a matter of, can we just get that tiny extra little follow through across the board, or do we just give back a lot of the gains tomorrow? So let's see if the bulls can continue showing the strength, because if they can continue showing the strength for the rest of this week, and strength but also holding, that will be a good sign of things to come, in my opinion, as well. So let's see, guys. Let's see how this shapes up for the rest of the week. Again, tomorrow is the last day. Friday is a half day. Markets closed on Thursday. Options flow on Tesla stock. Let's take a very quick peek on options flow. Nice bullish flow towards the end of the day, but you can see between 2 to 3 p.m., someone for whatever reason was just blasting short-term puts, right? These are 1128. That is for this Friday, actually. Someone's blasting a bunch of puts on Tesla stock. 100K, 100K, 200K, 100K, pretty much 200K, 120, 180, 120, 175, 116. pretty much all of them 407 puts, you know, some 415 and some 410, but most of them 407.5 puts. So someone, I don't know, maybe they're expecting news, maybe they're expecting the market to just be a massive bull trap. I'm not entirely sure, but just, you know, I guess worth mentioning. That is, let's see what that shapes up to be. But all in all, guys, that's what I got for you. Let me know what you think down below. Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.